The Invincible Empire. The Zalari Dominion had ruled the stars for over 10,000 cycles. Their empires stretched across countless systems, their fleets capable of erasing entire civilizations in days. To them, war was not a struggle, it was an inevitability. Their doctrine was simple: no species could match the Zalari. So, when they discovered humanity, a young, reckless race expanding beyond their home system, they saw nothing but another conquest. The Zalari's war council studied human technology and laughed. Primitive fusion reactors, rudimentary warships, and chemical-based weapons. A species that still relied on combustion for travel was no threat. Fleet Master Vorka, one of the Empire's most decorated generals, led the invasion force. As his fleet of dreadnoughts entered the Sol system, he was already preparing the surrender orders. The plan was simple: bombard their defenses, land occupation forces, and execute any who resisted. The Zalari had done this to hundreds of species. None had ever endured for long. When the first Zalari ships entered Earth's orbit, humanity did not beg for mercy. Instead, they sent a message across every frequency. If you seek war, you will find it. If you seek peace, leave now. This is your only warning. The arrogance of the message made the Zalari soldiers laugh. Fleet Master Vorka responded by unleashing a precision strike on Mars, reducing its largest colony to dust. Then he turned to Earth. He expected panic. Instead, he saw defiance. The humans fought back with everything they had. Their fleets, though outmatched, did not retreat. They used unorthodox tactics, hijacking enemy signals, jamming targeting systems, and even detonating their own ships in suicide runs to destroy Zalari vessels. On the ground, it was even worse. Zalari soldiers, bred for war, landed in human cities expecting submission. Instead, they found resistance. Streets became kill zones, civilians fought alongside soldiers, and entire cities became death traps. A single squad of humans could hold off an entire battalion using guerrilla warfare. The Zalari quickly learned that these primitives were not weak. They were something far more dangerous. They were relentless. Fleet Master Vorka watched in disbelief as his forces struggled. For the first time in his career, he hesitated. Humanity should have crumbled. Instead, they adapted. They endured. Then came the final shock. A Zalari cruiser, critically damaged, sent out a distress signal. Instead of finishing them off, the humans boarded the ship. Not to capture, not to salvage, but to send a message. When the transmission reached Vorka's command deck, he saw a bloodied human soldier standing over a defeated Zalari officer. The soldier's voice was calm. You thought you knew power, but you've never seen humanity fight. The transmission cut. The war had only begun. The unbreakable will. The Zalari had waged war for millennia, but never like this. Never against an enemy that refused to break. Fleet Master Vorka had assumed that once his troops landed, the war would be over within days. That was how it had always been. Conquered species either surrendered or perished. But on Earth, every street was a battlefield, every building a fortress, and every human a soldier, even if they had never held a weapon before. The Battle of New York was supposed to be a show of force. It became a massacre of Zalari troops. Thousands of Zalari shock troopers landed in the city, confident in their overwhelming firepower. But the humans didn't fight like any enemy they had encountered before. They didn't form neat battle lines or engage in predictable skirmishes. Instead, they struck from the shadows, set traps in abandoned buildings, and used the ruined streets to their advantage. The Zalari had superior weapons, but what good were plasma rifles when the enemy struck and vanished before you could fire? What good were energy shields when homemade explosives tore through armor? The Zalari had thought only trained soldiers could wage war. They had been wrong. Vorka watched in growing horror as reports flooded in. His commanders described human fighters who refused to retreat, even when outnumbered 10-1. They spoke of snipers who could eliminate entire squads before being found, of civilians who ran headfirst in a battle to save their wounded. A captured Zalari officer, dragged back to one of their strongholds, reported something even more chilling. They fight as if death means nothing to them. It was true. The humans fought without fear. They endured injuries that should have killed them, pressing forward with sheer determination. When one fell, another took their place. They turned Zalari weapons against them, hacked enemy communication systems, and even infiltrated their ranks, wearing captured armor to ambush unsuspecting patrols. Vorka couldn't comprehend it. These creatures should have submitted. They had no war fleets, no empire, nothing but a single planet. And yet, they refused to surrender. He ordered an orbital bombardment of key resistance zones. Entire districts were reduced to ash, but the humans still fought back. Even when their homes burned, even when their families were slaughtered, their will did not break. In the ruins of what was once a Zalari command post, a captured human was brought before one of Vorka's officers. Bloodied but unbowed, the soldier grinned through broken teeth. "Still think you're the strongest species in the galaxy?" The officer sneered. "Your resistance is pointless. We will burn your world to the ground." The human chuckled. "Then you'll have to fight us in the ashes." The officer hesitated. For the first time in Zalari history, doubt crept in. They had thought they understood power, but now, for the first time, they feared it. The price of arrogance. Fleet Master Vorka stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth burn beneath him. Cities had been reduced to rubble. Millions of humans had perished. And yet, the war was not won. It was getting worse. His invasion force was in chaos. Zalari supply lines were cut, communication networks sabotaged, and entire battalions wiped out overnight. Every attempt to establish control over the planet had failed. The humans were not fighting for territory. They were fighting for survival. And that made them more dangerous than any enemy the Zalari had ever faced. He had underestimated them. The first real disaster came in low orbit. The Zalari controlled space above Earth, but the humans had learned to use that control against them. A group of human engineers hijacked a Zalari warship docked for repairs. Using nothing but salvaged enemy weapons and improvised tactics, they turned the vessel against its own fleet. Before the Zalari could react, the stolen ship, renamed Defiance, led a suicidal charge into the heart of the Dominion's battle formation. By the time the Zalari fleet stopped the rampage, 3 dreadnoughts were destroyed, 6 more were disabled, and the humans had escaped. For the first time in history, the Zalari fleet had been forced to retreat from a supposedly inferior enemy. But the nightmare wasn't over. On the ground, the resistance escalated. Zalari commanders reported that entire platoons were vanishing overnight. Guerrilla fighters struck with terrifying precision, taking out supply convoys and high-ranking officers. Zalari soldiers, trained to face conventional warfare, were terrified. The humans fought like monsters. Captured Zalari reported horrifying stories. Humans who refused to surrender even when dismembered. Wounded soldiers strapping explosives to their chests and throwing themselves into Zalari bunkers. Cyber warfare specialists turning Zalari drones and AI-controlled turrets against their own forces. One Zalari officer, his face covered in battle scars, whispered his final report before taking his own life. They do not fear death. They welcome it if it means victory. And then, the impossible happened. A human counteroffensive. The humans, outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched, began pushing the Zalari back. Major landing zones were destroyed, orbital stations hijacked, and entire regiments of Zalari forces wiped out by an enemy that should have never stood a chance. Fleet Master Vorka's hands trembled as he listened to his officers argue. Some demanded a full retreat. Others insisted on doubling the attack. But deep down, he knew the truth. They had already lost. Not in numbers, not in firepower, but in spirit. Because the Zalari had never faced an enemy like this before. They had crushed civilizations, erased entire species, but humanity refused to break. And in that moment, Vorka finally understood. This war wasn't about strength. It was about will. And the humans had more of it than the Zalari could ever comprehend. The lesson of humanity. Fleet Master Vorka stood in silence, staring at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. His dreadnought, the Viathan, was the last Zalari command ship still operational in the Sol system. Around him, the remnants of his armada drifted lifelessly in orbit, gutted by human firepower and sabotage. On the surface below, his soldiers were either dead, captured, or in full retreat. The unbreakable Zalari war machine had been shattered, not by superior weapons or advanced technology, but by something far more terrifying. Humanity's will to fight. Reports flooded his terminal. Mutinies were breaking out in his own ranks. Zalari's soldiers, once proud warriors of the Dominion, refused to deploy to the surface. They whispered of ghosts in the ruins, of human warriors who could not die, of resistance fighters who fought even when their bodies had failed them. Vorka clenched his fists. His empire had never suffered a defeat like this, and yet it was happening. The final blow came with a message broadcast across every surviving Zalari frequency. The human who appeared on the screen was battered, bloodied, but still standing. His eyes burned with something Vorka had never seen before, a defiance that could not be extinguished. Your empire believed strength was measured in ships, in weapons, in domination. But true power lies in those who refuse to kneel. You came here thinking you would conquer us. The human stepped closer to the camera, voice unwavering. You have only made us stronger. Vorka felt something he had never known before. Fear. In a last, desperate move, he issued the retreat order. His remaining warships activated their FTL drives, abandoning thousands of stranded Zalari troops on Earth. The once great invasion force, the armada that was supposed to bring humanity to its knees, fled like cowards. The war was over, but the consequences had only begun. Across the galaxy, the impossible had happened. A primitive species had defeated the greatest military force in known space. The news spread like wildfire. Subjugated species, long crushed beneath the boot of the Zalari, rose in rebellion. The Dominion's grip on the stars began to crack. And at the center of it all stood humanity, a species no longer seen as weak, no longer underestimated. As Vorka's ship slipped into the void, he replayed the human's final words in his mind. We never wanted war, but if you bring it to us, be prepared to fight until the last breath. He had thought he understood power. He had been wrong, because true power wasn't in fleets or weapons.